Hi everyone, this is basically going to be a pure MySQL PHP tutorial. I'm going to be teaching you the basics of connecting, retrieving data, handling errors, and modifying data. So there's going to be some SQL code in here as well, or some SQL queries rather. Okay, so to get started, what I'm going to do is just show you my directory structure. I'm in a folder called MySQL. I'm going to create in a couple of files here. The first one I'm going to create is going to be called connect.php. I'm going to come in here, click on MySQL. I'm going to save this as connect.php. Now what we're doing here is we're creating a separate file that we're going to include with every page that we use. This is just a lot easier when coming to connect to your database. All you really need to do is type your include function and specify this file. So I'm going to go ahead and create another file, which is going to be my main MySQL file with the code that I'm going to be showing you guys. Okay, so I've got my MySQL.php open. This is of course going to be PHP code, so we need our PHP tags, and the same for the connect.php. Now if you don't know what I'm talking about with this include function, you'll see in a minute. What we're going to do is, firstly I'm going to teach you how to connect to the database. Now if you don't already have it installed, or rather on your web server, I suggest you check out PHP and basically what this does is, let me just bring it up, it's basically a database interface PHP written program. And basically, or script rather, what we're doing is we're looking at the inside of my database at the moment, my MySQL server, and it's giving us our table information, our database information, information about my server, etc, etc. A lot of it you don't need to know, but it's a really good starter program if you're just starting to use PHP MySQL or just MySQL in general. It's a really good way to start interfacing with your database. Rather than using the command line way of doing things, it's a bit hard for the first time starting. Okay, so what we see here is our databases. I've got one called PHP Academy and one called PHP Login, which is another tutorial that I've created. The others are just as standard, they're just for holding data. Don't delete them or anything like that. All you really need to be doing is creating new databases. And to create a new database, we've got a simple box here, and we're just going to be creating databases. And what I'm going to just call this is, in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work within my PHP Academy database for now. It's a lot easier. So to create a new database, simple enough, you type in the name and you just click create. Obviously mine's already created here, so I'm going to use this one. I'm going to click on it and you can see that I've got several tables inside. This is denoted by this little symbol here when using PHP and this is guestbook for my guestbook tutorial. But what I'm going to want to do is create a new table on this database for the specifics of this tutorial, and I'm going to call this let's say we can call it people. I'm going to call this people. And the number of fields is quite important. You can't leave this blank. It's the number of fields on your database, on your table. This is for storing each column of data. So for example, the first one, usually when you're dealing with records, you're going to have an ID, which is a numerical value. So it's a number that's going to increment each time. And this will allow you to reference your records that you've stored individually by their unique number. And you usually set this to the primary key. And if you're not familiar with databases, you need to start looking up terms like primary key. I'm not going to be dealing with secondary keys because it's quite a flexible way to do this anyway with a MySQL database. Just read up on databases in general. If you have Microsoft Access or any other database program, I suggest you have a fiddle around with that and get to grips with databases. Okay, so the number of fields depends on how much data you want to store and what data you want to store. And usually when I'm creating fields, I'm going to bring up a new sort of blank document, and I'll start by typing out the fields that I want. The first one's always going to be ID. Like I said, this is a self-incrementing value every time you create a new record. So it will be 1 as the first record, 2, 3, 4, and the data will be stored after this. So it's a really useful field to have. And since my table is called people, I'm going to store some data about some people. So what I'm going to have is, let's say, first name. I'm going to have last name. Let's have age as well, and let's say gender. And I think we can leave it at that for now. I don't want to make it too complicated. So here we can see that we've got 5 fields. So all I really need to go back here and do is type in 5 here and click go. And that'll automatically be created for you. You'll see it pop up here in a minute. In fact, you won't, because we haven't created our field names yet. So, okay, we have, by standard, there are a lot of options for these, but our field is our field name. So the first one's going to be ID. The type is the data type that you want to store this field in, so anything that goes into it must adhere to this data type. Varchar is quite common, and it's a really useful one. It requires a length, so this stands for variable characters. So you can have, say, 25 characters long, you could have 250 characters long, you could have 100 characters long, you can even have 1 character long. So really we're just storing the type and the length of the data stored. Now it helps that if you're, say, storing a first name, well, we'll get to that in a minute, but say our field name here is first name and I have a varchar, there's no point in typing, say, 500, because what we're doing here is we're using unnecessary amounts of data, and really a typical first name will be no more than 25 characters. If it is, and you know that it will be, let's say go for like 30 or 35 or something like that. But for now I'm going to store my first name as, say, 20 or 25 characters. I'm going to go for 20. Now back to our ID. The type of this is going to be an integer, because of course it's going to be a number, it's going to be self-incrementing. This will be 1, 2, 3, 4, the amount of records we use. And we have some other options here. Now this here is primary key, we're just going to select this, and our extra, we can see that we've got auto underscore increment. This is basically an auto increment, and it will give this particular function where every time you enter a new record, this will automatically go up. So we've got first name, we've got last name, and again I'm going to set this at about 30. What else do we have? We had age, and obviously this is going to be an integer, and we had gender. Okay. Now in fact what I'm going to do is, instead of putting age in, I'm going to say date of birth. So this is date of birth. I'm going to set this as a date, because you can in fact have a, let me just find it, you can in fact have a date data type, and I'll show you how that works as well. So our length for our date doesn't need to be set. We have a standard format for this, so we don't need to worry about that. And our gender, what I can do is I can set this to, say, a varchar of character 1, and we can say what we're going to do is, storing this, we're going to say M for male and F for female. Okay, so if we go across, we can see that there are lots of options. You can comment this yourself, you can remind yourself what this field does, but usually it should be in the field name that you specify exactly what you're saving. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and click save, and you can see that this is magically appeared here, and we've got our SQL query here. Now when I was talking about command line earlier, this is what you would have to type to create that. However, we've used a graphical user interface to save ours. And we can see down here we have our fields, our types, and our collation attributes, null data, for example. Now default, I didn't tell you, is the default value that's stored as. So for example, if you had a field saying has the user registered, or is the user I don't know, a specific something they could be, so I don't know, I can't think of an example, but you'd have the default here. So for example, if I wanted to store everyone that registers as male by default or as female by default, I could have M or F here. And we've got auto increment here, and some other data that we don't need to know about for this tutorial. Okay, so basically we've created our table. If you go into part 2 of this, I'm going to be showing you how to insert some data, and also how to retrieve this data from your database using PHP. Okay, so join me in the next part, and I'll see you soon.